Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 27 of the In the 11 podcast, hosted by myself, Brendan Griffiths, an American footballer chasing a professional contract, currently residing and playing here in Denmark. I'm going to get you guys all caught up on everything that has happened in the past week and kind of let you know where I'm at. So let's get the ball rolling. So I'm going to do my best because I have a lot to talk about on this episode. But I'm recording this after we played my first, match in Denmark today. It was a friendly against another team. I'm not sure exactly what level they were, but needless to say, kind of frustrated about the day as a whole. As a team, the team I was playing with, we lost 3-0, and I just felt like I was happy with my second half performance, I guess, in context of everything. I was happy with the second half performance, not super happy with the first half, and really just the first few minutes, I guess. Like, I was just speaking to the coach afterwards, and he was saying how the first few minutes was really poor for me, and I would agree. I don't know why, I just wasn't fully in it right from the beginning. I don't know if it was lack of adjustment or I had been asked to come and be there for the first game in case anyone got injured, and it was terrible weather today, so I had to stand out in the rain and the snow and basically freezing all day long. So, I'm not going to sit here and make excuses because that's just annoying, but overall could have been better on the day in a lot of different ways, and it's frustrating, but it's part of the process, part of the journey. Like I said, this is the second week fully of training done, and I had done okay on Tuesday. Really unhappy with kind of the way I ended the training session. And Thursday I played really, really well, and I was super pumped about that. So I thought that was just going to kind of carry over into Saturday, and it didn't. So, it's just hard because not every session is going to be perfect and not every game is going to be perfect, and you just have to kind of stay really mentally strong in this process, and it's not always easy. So I'm going to try and stay as focused as I can here during this podcast and give you guys the full update, but just wanted to kind of come off the top with that, just that I'm frustrated about the day. As I just mentioned, Tuesday felt like I did well kind of in the middle of the session, and then towards the end we were doing this drill, which basically was like a 4v4 or 5v5, which had bumpers on the end, and when I was one of the bumpers, just all the crosses I was putting in were just like way too high or not accurate, and so it was just frustrating for me personally. And then Thursday I did really well. Like, I just went into it with a different mindset of just like attacking the session and just, I know I can play at this level. I've proven to myself I can play at this level, and I think a lot of it is just like my own mentality as I go into sessions. As I mentioned last episode, there's so much time in between each session and free time. I sometimes just overthink everything, and I don't stop myself and then reset as I go into the session. I'm still thinking about the things that happened last time or what might happen this time. And when I come in and I be the aggressor and I just do what I know I can do, because I know I can play at this level, like I said, and I know I can do really, really well at this level. I just need to go in with that mentality. And also the other thing I remind myself is just like, nobody has gone through the hardship and the struggle that I've had to get here. So play like that every time, play with that chip on your shoulder, because there's only like a few sessions that I'm really going to get here in Denmark, and you don't want to leave anything on the table. So Thursday did super well, was happy with that. was like flying all around, and still some passes that I wish I could have back. But at the end of the day, I think if you have a perfect session, then that's probably not a good thing. Like, you should always be in an environment where you're still going to make some mistakes or two, because that's how you're going to get better. And then today, like I said, first couple minutes I just came out flat, whether it was I was cold, whatever, won't make an excuse. But especially in the second half, I had to flip that switch again. I was like, yo, come on, like, let's go. And then I felt like I did really, really well. Our team was on the bit more of the front foot. We created way more chances than we did in the first half. And we still obviously ended up losing the game, didn't finish any of our chances, but a little bit happier at least that a silver lining can be taken from that game. It can be the second half. So that's the update sort of on this week with trainings and games, stuff like that. I also this week met with an American guy actually who owns a gym here in Aarhus, and he's a friend of the coaches, and they put me kind of in contact, and that's actually how I found where I was going to live as well, through this guy, through the gym. So I did a PT session with him, which was really, really good, and now I think I'll be able to go and start working out there and using the equipment, which will be nice to do on some of my off days and just get some of that strength back, get some of that gym work back going again. And so that was good. And then too, in addition, he had mentioned something to me about there was a local guy who was maybe looking for some help in terms of a job excuse me, in terms of a job for like landscaping and maybe a little bit of cash coming in for me. So definitely going to pursue that and see if anything comes of that, because always putting more cash in your pocket is going to help you along this journey. As much cash as you can get your hands on, it's only going to make things a little bit easier. So I reached out to him, and hopefully I hear something back soon, and I'll keep you guys posted on if anything comes of that. And another thing is that we'll kind of maybe fill in some of the free time that I have more, because I think one thing that's really important, that's kind of the main topic of what I want to talk about in this episode, is just when you're pursuing football, even at the highest levels, you're going to have a lot of free time. There's only like a small window of the day where you're really going to be, you can only train for so long during the day and do gym work and all those recovery type things. You're going to have a lot of time on your own, and especially if you don't have family with you, or, girlfriend, fiance, whatever, wife, then you're going to spend a lot of time on your own. And people can think that it can be really boring at times. Like, I've had people here ask me, they're like, oh, what do you do? Aren't you bored? And my answer is, to be honest, no. But that's because I've learned a lot from doing this for a while. And I want to give you guys some insight kind of into what I mean. I now know I have to occupy myself with a lot of different things to make sure that I don't get bored. I can't just watch Netflix for 6 or 7 hours a day, because that will just drive me insane. So, I have training. I do a ton of other things to try and focus on my body. I do little workouts in my room. I stretch. I go for runs. I juggle the soccer ball. This podcast is huge. I talk about this all the time, but this podcast has been so huge for a lot of different things, but also occupying more time, because I have this project now, this kind of mini business that I work on a lot, where I, work on creating ideas for episodes, recording the episodes, producing them, producing content for the social media, running behind the scenes stuff with advertising and just so much that goes into this business, which I love now, and it kind of has become a passion of mine. And I'm happy that I started it. You know, in addition to that, I read every day. I practice my Danish every day. I speak a lot on the phone to friends and family back home. Like, I watch football as much as I can. You know, you have to have so many different things so that it's not just, and don't get me wrong, I do watch Netflix. I do watch a lot of Netflix. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. But don't let, you know, Netflix or video games be just the only thing that you do whenever you're not playing football. Keep your mind active and engaged, because you really have to be a self-motivated and disciplined person to do this, because it's really just going to be yourself that has to hold you accountable. There's not always going to be mom, dad, somebody who's going to be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, why have you just been laying around all day? You have to be the person that's going to kick yourself into gear and keep yourself engaged and find other ways to be productive. You know, a big thing too coming up for me soon is going to be reaching out to clubs again and doing that whole process of finalizing my CV and putting together a highlight tape. And, you know, I'm always kind of speaking to contacts and speaking to connections and doing that legwork as well to kind of keep this career afloat as long as I can. So that's a big thing as well. And just quickly, I want to touch upon the fact that I am still waiting a little bit to contact clubs just because I don't have up-to-date highlight footage. Now, as I've talked about on here, a CV and a highlight tape is really, really important. And it may not be the thing that gets you a contract or gets you a team, but it may get your foot in the door. And actually, kind of today, the more and more I think about it, even though I know I just wrote that in my outline for today's podcast, I'm thinking I may just have to use the old footage that I have until I get a hold of new footage, because if I wait until our first game might not be till April 10th, and then who knows when I get a hold of that footage and can edit it, and then that's only one game, you know? So maybe it's the type of thing where I use the footage that I have now, and then as I get updated game footage, I start sending that out, or I reach back out to the clubs that didn't get back to me the first time and say, hey, now I have new footage. You know, I know it seems like my mind is a bit scatterbrained right now, but I'm kind of talking through all these things with you as well, the listener, just giving you kind of the rundown of how I'm thinking, how I'm plotting to continue to, you know, give myself the best chance to be successful, because that's what this is. So, like I said, that becomes another big part of my time is spent on, you know, trying to find the next avenue in my career. And for you out there, if you're doing something like this, you have to find the things that are going to bring structure to your life, because really the only thing that you'll have that's structured is training. And if you train with your team only, you know, 3 times a week or something like that, that's a lot of downtime that you have just open, and try and find ways to occupy that time and make some part of your life a little bit better. You know, whether it's working on a business, whether it's getting a job, whether it's studying something, learning a new skill, just anything. And it you know, it can be a hobby, it can be a passion project, it can be whatever. But I just encourage everyone to find other interests outside of football and pursue those as well, because you will have that downtime. You know, even if it is still football related, if you want to coach a team or train individual players, or, you know, I've known guys who go out and get their personal training certificate. They can start to do that and work in the gym. Like, there's so many different things that you can do, even if you don't want to venture fully away from football. Like, kind of stay still on the same tree and find other avenues for you to explore. So that is really big, because it's so easy to fall into the trap and And I was probably victim to it a little bit in Germany, and I know a lot of other guys were, where it was just they would go to train, they would show up to the meals, and besides that, it was just endless hours of laying in bed watching Netflix. And I just realized early on that that wasn't going to be sustainable for me, and I needed to do a lot of other things to keep my brain just active. And the other thing too is it kind of takes your mind off of the football for a little bit. It allows you an escape, and yes, Netflix can do that as well, but other things that keep you kind of thinking and mentally active, those are going to be really helpful as well, because when you are watching Netflix, you're kind of just fully shutting down and turning everything off and just interacting with the content. Whereas, something like this project, this business, for me, it occupies a lot of my bandwidth in my brain to, focus on my career, but also focus on my career maybe in the context of this podcast. How can I further this career and then also share it with you guys, share the journey with you? And I'm always thinking about, ideas for content, ideas for episodes, ideas for guests to have on. So it's been really cool for me, and I hope this continues to grow into a business that maybe I could even pursue after I'm done playing. So kind of in conjunction with this idea of being self-motivated and self-disciplined, I think something that might be a little bit of a tougher topic to talk about, but I do really want to bring it up, is you really have to be, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this other than just, you have to be okay with yourself. You have to be okay being on your own and kind of living inside your own mind and living with your own thoughts, if that makes sense. There is a lot of stress and anxiety and downright just fear, and that creeps into you when you are pursuing something like this. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't suffer from a lot of those things. My mental health hasn't always been the best, and there's been times where I've really struggled with it, but it's something that I really try and work on. And there's a lot of different ways that you can work on it. I think one really big way is you have to have a lot of positive self-talk. There's so many times where you're going to be, back at home alone at your apartment after a training session where you did poorly, and those thoughts are going to creep in of, oh, well, I can't even kill it at this level. What am I doing out here? It'd be so easy for me to go back home. And that's going to happen. And you have to be able to pick yourself up and start to change the narrative inside your own head of, you are a good player. You are a good player. This is how hard you've worked. This is what you've done to get here. Continue to push, continue to push. You have to become like a motivational quote book inside your own head and be your biggest supporter, your biggest cheerleader, because yes, people back home will support you, but they're not going to be here with you 24/7. They're not going to be able to communicate with you 24/7 and pick you up in the moments when you're down. So I would encourage anyone, if you're really struggling with some issues within yourself, some internal demons or struggles, if you will, before you venture out on your own and you're going to live by yourself and chase a pro contract, do your best to try and maybe not completely overcome them, but if anything, just develop strategies with, whether it's a professional or a family member or a friend or someone that you trust and a mentor that you feel that you can speak to in confidence. At the very least, you have to try and develop a strategy or develop a method for you to be able to deal with those times when things get hard, when you're alone, because I just don't want you to get swallowed up by the loneliness. You have to, you just have to kind of be okay with being on your own. And if you have stuff, if you have baggage, if you have stuff that's weighing you down, try and sort that out in an environment where you have the support maybe of your family and your friends, and you can lean on them a little bit more to give you that strength and that springboard to then maybe come over to Europe. And now when you're on your own, you did some of the legwork prior. Hopefully this is making sense and resonating with you guys, just because I don't want somebody to be in a situation where it's like, they're really struggling with their anxiety or they're struggling with something like depression, and then they just jump overseas to Europe and they're by themselves and they just get eaten alive because they're all alone and they didn't really figure out how to deal or how to work through some of the struggles that they were going through. And a really big piece of that puzzle is you have to find ways to just fully disconnect yourself from the game of football. And I know that's hard to hear because, this is what we love, this is what we want to do. And like I say, sometimes it just scares me how much I want this and how much I just want to be successful at this. It frightens me a little bit, but you can't think about this game 24/7. You can't think about every single thing, every single action that happened in the game or the training session, or just, you can't fret and overthink every single moment. What's going to happen next? If this team emails me, if this agent calls me, what's going to happen in the next game? What's going to happen in the next training? Like, if you don't have times where you just completely disconnect and don't think about football whatsoever, then again, I think it will kind of consume you, and you won't actually be able to give your best self when you need to perform. I am grateful because I've started to learn some ways to try and do that. I do just go for walks and listen to podcasts. That's a great way for me to just kind of tune out. And I don't even listen to things about soccer. It's usually about other sports in the States or comedy podcasts. I talk to family and friends back home, and I do like to talk about what's going on with me in soccer, but I almost sometimes try and steer the conversation towards whatever's going on in their life back home, because I want that conversation to be my disconnect and take me into a new kind of world for a little bit. I talk to family, I know I talk to my mom every single day. Probably talk to other family, my sister, my cousins, just friends from home. I try and talk to somebody on the phone each and every day, just because sometimes you can feel like you don't have any real connections out here with people. I'm still learning these guys, and they've only met me 2 weeks ago. So, even if we're to hang out, there's not like a real authentic connection with someone who I've built a bond with for years and I've talked to about everything. And, I can talk to people here. I have a good relationship with my coach. I have a good relationship with some of my teammates, but for the most part, it's just me on my own. So you have to have those connections and those routes with which you can disconnect from the game, because it will consume you. And I've been down that road before. I was in that place in Germany where towards the end, I didn't even want to go to training. I had strung together a couple of poor performances in training, and I wasn't getting the recognition by being brought into the first team, even to sit on the bench. And it just absolutely just rattled my confidence. And I was thinking, well, what am I doing here at this training other than just doing it for my own self to try and get better? And it got kind of, I'll say, like a toxic training environment towards the end. And guys were just screaming at each other all the time, and I would just go and I would be afraid to make mistakes. And then I would come home and I would think about the training and how it kind of sucked, and guys probably think I suck and how they don't like me, and how I dreaded going to training the next day. I was so grateful for the days off, and sometimes, once or twice I even probably could have trained through a little knock, but I was like, I don't want to. I'm going to take the day off. And that was a real bad cycle that I got into with that. It really made me question my love for the game. So that's why, that's what taught me that I need to have the disconnect. I need to find ways to fully tune out the game. And Germany was a really hard place to do that because you were always living with the guys and you were in a really tough living conditions, as I've mentioned before. And so here it's been a little bit easier to do that because I kind of have this place away from the training ground where I can just come and unwind and completely switch off. So that's been huge. And not to mention too, while the training is good and it's high intensity, the environment or the guys aren't as toxic, at least right now. And I will knock on some sort of wood because hopefully that doesn't change. But it's not like a positive, always kumbaya sort of vibe in the training, but at the same time it's not just as cutthroat and not enjoyable as it was in Germany. So I'm grateful for that, and really the only kind of pressure or stress comes from me putting it upon myself to wanting to be the best in the training. So that's also another thing that's makes it a little bit easier to have that disconnect, is when you don't feel like the pressure is coming from all angles, coming from the coach, coming from the other players, and coming from yourself. Then it's like just a perfect storm of stress and pressure, and it's really hard to perform. So I would say what I want you guys to really take away from this episode, and maybe if I could put this into a thesis statement for you, is that the emotional strength and fortitude that you have, really kind of how well you can keep yourself in check and how well you can keep your mind positive is the most important thing on this journey, because nearly everything about what you're doing or what I'm doing right now is uncomfortable. Everything about it's uncomfortable. I live 1,000 miles away from everyone that I love. I do not speak the primary language that everyone speaks here. I am joining a new team and a new club and trying to find my way in that club. All the while I'm trying to find an opportunity that can support me to be able to stay in this country for longer than 90 days at a time. I am not really making the same amount of money that I was when I was back home in the States, and so that's putting a financial uncomfortable strain on me as well. I'm alone a lot. I am paying for this apartment again with the finances. And I don't want you guys to think that this is just me complaining about everything, because I'm not. I just played a match in Denmark today. How many Americans in the world can say that they've done that? Not many. But in pursuit of this dream, a lot of things are going to be uncomfortable. And I know that doing uncomfortable things is what allows you to grow, and it's pushing me to become my better self, and it's making my comfort zone that much bigger. And so I'm grateful for this experience. But when you're in an uncomfortable situation, it still doesn't make it any less uncomfy. You're still going to feel all those emotions while going through the uncomfortable situation, even if you're aware of how it's going to benefit you in the long term. So I just want to reiterate and pound this home that your emotional strength and your fortitude is going to be the number one factor in whether or not you make it in this or not, in my opinion. And you have to keep pushing yourself, knowing that these sacrifices that you are making are going to pay off. If you remember back to that episode when I said, what's the one secret? It's the sacrifices. Now, it's what are you willing to sacrifice? And then within that sacrifice, can you still stay strong and keep pushing forward, right? Can you sacrifice not being with your family every day or not being able to talk to your family all the time and stay strong within that and keep your eye on the prize and focus on the task at hand and still keep chasing the dream? Can you sacrifice some of your money and still stay strong emotionally and mentally and still keep plugging away, knowing that something's going to pay off for you? It's easier said than done, and it takes a lot of practice. And I'm not coming on here to preach and tell you how I'm the strongest emotional guy that there is, but it's just, some of the things that I've learned along the way is that that's really what it takes to even give yourself the chance to still sign the contract. Because really that's kind of what you're doing, is just keeping yourself in the game, giving yourself the chance to sign the contract. There's so many people that get out here or get into a new environment and they get hit with all this adversity all at once, and emotionally, and mentally, they're just not really equipped to handle it. And so they go back home. The number of guys, we always used to laugh, the number of guys who came through our club at Germany and went home, far more than the number of guys who stayed there till the end. I couldn't even tell you every single person that I'd come across, whether, it's through a training or a trial or whatever. It was kind of like a revolving door. And there were certain guys who we could kind of tell as soon as they showed up. It sounds bad. I don't want to sound like I'm just an ass as all these guys are coming in, but there were certain guys that you could just kind of tell right away. They would start to complain about stuff. They would, complain about the living, complain about the food, and not in the same way that we did, because we had been there for a while, where you just complain about it just to get it off your chest. They were like, what? I can't do this. I can't live like this. And we knew like their time was ticking. They were about to be gone. And we didn't, those of us who stayed there, we didn't really, again, it sounds cutthroat, but we didn't lose that much sleep over it, because we were like, okay, they're not willing to go through the same things that we are to get there. And Germany has taught me that, and so far here has taught me that I know what I'm willing to go through to get to my dream and get to my goal is a lot more than a lot of other people are willing to do. So every time I step out onto the pitch and every time I do something to try and further my goal, I know I'm willing to go to a little bit more of an uncomfortable place than a lot of other people out there. And that's what keeps me emotionally strong and emotionally in check, because I just remind myself how much I've been through. I always remind myself about the situations where it got super difficult. I think back to Germany so much, and it was hell when I was going through it, but I am really grateful for it now, because a lot of things here seem like cake compared to Germany. I have a nice big warm bed I can sleep in. I have a room. I have this living room. I have hot showers all the time. I don't have to shower in a locker room. I don't have to, eat not always the most appetizing food. So I just know that situation kind of molded me to be able to handle a little bit more than the next guy. And now here there's different challenges, as I mentioned, that I have to face that Germany didn't pose and I haven't faced yet. And I'm trying to face them best I can head on. But I just, I attack now everything, every training, every match, every trial that I hope to go on with just the idea and the thought that nobody's gone through what I had to get through to get here right now. And I now know, based on the path and the trajectory that I'm going on right now, I know that when I leave Denmark, I will feel confident that I did everything in my power to try and achieve my goal. I want to achieve it so bad, so I try not to let myself think about the possibility of it not happening. But really, at the end of the day, all I can ask of myself is just putting myself in the best position at all times to achieve it, and then, whatever happens, happens. But I know I don't have any regrets is really the main crux of this. I always said, in Germany, and I'll say it again now, I just want to get on that plane and not have any regrets. And I know the path that I'm on right now, I won't have any regrets. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about before I wrap it up with you guys here is I was featured, actually, this podcast was featured in a pretty big German magazine publication called 11 Freunde. So it's the number 11 and then Freunde. It's a German football magazine. And basically there was an article written about self-made footballers, and most of the article is about a former teammate of mine in Germany named Spencer Muller, who has a really big YouTube channel and talks about, the same things that I do really, and now he's a professional player for LA Force. And the article is really mostly about him and his YouTube channel and kind of how that propelled him to signing a professional contract. But there is a paragraph in there, I believe on the second page of the article, that does mention me, and it is in German, so you would have to translate it. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's pretty cool, and hopefully it's the first of many features in publications and stuff like that. So I thought it was kind of a cool little testament or ode to some of the work that I've tried to put in on this podcast and growing this channel and everything about it. So definitely check that out and let me know what you guys think if you get a chance to do that. I know every week I've been saying how we're going to have guests on soon, and I can promise you that the next episode will definitely have a guest. I just wanted these first few weeks to kind of give you all the information as it's coming in, and then, as I've mentioned before, I think doing this podcast on my own and having a lot of these episodes be just me was done deliberately because I wanted to show you what it's like. I wanted to show you that it is just me here. It's just me that sets up the camera, that sets up the podcast, because I'm here by myself in a whole nother country. And that kind of juxtaposition and that maybe symbolism, if you will, of being a solo podcaster and being a solo American out here kind of for the journey, I wanted those things to go hand in hand, and I felt like it adds a layer and adds an element to this podcast that I like. So there will definitely be more episodes where it's just me, but I do know that there's also some good content that can be had from having some guests on and having interviews as well. I know you guys like those episodes too, so I do want to definitely mix those in and continue to grow the channel and the podcast in that way as well. So there'll be some of those coming up. And then, we can mix in some episodes where it's just me back on the mic, where, from here on out now, it may be a few weeks until you get another update. And then I might have a little bit more to tell you guys versus just a week in between each update. There's not always a ton that happens, besides just training and games. So I think that's a really good way to do it for these next few weeks while I am still here in Denmark. With that being said, I would just encourage you guys to do the rounds, as I say. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you have not already done that. We do have the video podcast, so go check that out if you're listening. If you are on Spotify, give us a follow. Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us, review us, and follow all the socials as well. Instagram, in the 11 pod, TikTok, in the 11 pod, and shoot us an email if you would like, in the 11pod@gmail.com. Don't forget about the Tell Us About Your Dreams. That will be in the description of this, the link to that. We try and do those every week, where we have you, the listener, share your dream with us, whether it's football or not, and I try and give my 2 cents on the topic, and we converse about the dreams of the audience. So I appreciate you guys so much for listening this far, and thank you for being along here with my journey over here in Denmark. It really does mean a lot to me to have all the support from a community out there like you guys. So continue to send your love as best you can, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon.